Hi everyone, welcome to our latest webinar. This is about automation and how it can create proactive support. Thank you all for joining. We are joined today by Lauren and Jason. So Jason is from Helpshift. Jason, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jason Copeland. I'm a customer success manager at Helpshift. And before this, I was actually in the customer support game for about 17 years. I was a manager over at Blizzard Entertainment, so I'm very familiar with game support in particular, but app support especially. And then, yeah, I'm excited to meet all of you and talk about automation.
Nice. And Lauren?
Yeah, hey everyone, Lauren Wade, Head of Community Management at Kolibri Games. So yeah, a Berlin-based mobile games company. I've been at the company around 4 years. I've been in gaming for around 8, and prior to that it was 10 years in retail. So again, also quite extensive experience with all these kind of juicy support topics. Very excited to delve into automation today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hi Sarah, thanks for joining us. So guys, we will start now. So the agenda for today is there's quite a lot to get through, quite a lot of juicy topics to really bite into around automation. The agenda starts with customer data, how that is a shared language. Now you might be wondering, what's that got to do with automation? Well, we'll get right into that. Then we'll be talking as support as the collector and share of insights, how automation helps product get better, from reactive to proactive support via automation, as well as balancing the agent with automation. Now, guys, if you have any questions, please use the question tab on your bottom right, and we will get to them either throughout the webinar where we think it's going to be the best or at the end. I will try my best to run some polls, but don't hold me to that because it might be, we're trying to figure out where to best do it. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so now, to begin with, we are discussing customer data as a shared language. So one of the questions that I have is, when you're talking about customer data and you're talking about it being a shared language, what does that actually mean? Well, it's allowing your different teams to be able to have that communication where when customer insights come in, you know when and where to look for that information, whether that's shared across the teams or in a specific area and categorized or organized in a certain way, you know where to go, where there isn't different teams being disconnected. So, for example, we have 54% of organizations that manage customer experience. They manage those experience operations in silos, which means they completely act in separate ways and separate practices, and this can be quite damaging. And 33% of teams involved in customer experience management, they have problems around communication and collaboration across teams. So the question I have today, Jason, to start off with, when we're talking about customer data and we're talking about these team silos, from an in-app messaging perspective, how do you enable that customer data from those in-app messages and feedback to be shared across the business? And how do you make sure that it doesn't stay within customer support as like its own silo?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of start on that, it really does have to be something that the whole company participates in, ideally, as many stakeholders as possible. We want leadership to be interested in the kind of data that you can get from the users that are speaking to your company every single day, right? And the best way to do that is to get everybody involved, to make everybody aware, to see the value and the types of insights that you can gain from that customer data. And in order to really capitalize on that, you need the information that you're providing them to be organized. Like, is it providing similar views on this data from a number of different angles, because different stakeholders might need to see it from a different perspective or a different type of user segment or issue type segment. And then, of course, you also want it to be clear, right? Is it actually telling a story? Is this providing insight that the stakeholders can actually use to take action? And then just, to be curious, my last job, a lot of what happened was our engineers were asking support questions like, hey, what do we currently not know that we should be focusing on right now? And vice versa, support asking engineers, what do you want to know about your product? Is there any insights you're not getting currently you wish you had? To make it a collaborative experience between us and then the stakeholders.
So yeah, so it's you know, and I suppose that's part of like understanding how each other works, and in order to do that, sort of feeding into each other's like sort of ways of working, as it were, when you're talking about customer insights. Lauren, I suppose from the perspective of ensuring teams across the business have access to that customer data, when we're talking about reviews specifically, how do you know, maybe perhaps in Kolibri games or things that you've seen, how do you ensure that you can do this sort of collaboration and this sharing of customer data across the business?
And it's kind of adapting a little bit, as Jason said, with the ways of other teams working, perhaps. So data always invokes kind of this feeling of something that's like cold, hard data, which is, of course, how certain teams will work within the company. But then the joy of working in customer support is also that data has humanity behind it. And that's also where we can then work with it. So we can not only use features such as tags and categories and things within reviews to get the kind of distilled data of what's going on within a product, but we can then also provide the qualitative stuff as well from it. So yeah, it's mixing the two very nicely and just getting it to the people who need it in the way that they will best be able to interact with it.
Yeah, so again, it's, you know, making that customer data accessible from the perspective of having it in a digestible way to begin with. Cool. So to move on to the conversation around automation and how this works with sharing that data, you know, what we have is when you know, insights come in either from in-app messages or reviews, you know, you're going to have them from various different topics, talking about various different things, like maybe like asking questions about different issues that you may have in your around the app. Now, that can be quite noisy, and I kind of envision it as like a sort of knot, like a tangle that you can't really figure out. You know, if you don't have something helping you, you can't really figure out where to look and what to do and how to organize it. So what automation can do is it can untangle that knot. So you go from working with what's on the left to working with, you know, a nice ordered filing cabinet. So Lauren, I think from the perspective of coming to you around auto tagging, how have you found the use of auto tags in helping that clarity of that data coming in from reviews? Like, how does it create that neat filing cabinet of different categories and different topics automatically? And can you provide like a nice little example for that happening at Kolibri?
Sure. I mean, well, spoiler alert, we're still a bit of a work in progress with our auto tag, so I wouldn't say that it's 100% perfect, but that's always the way, and it'll be the same for everybody who starts using automation. Yeah. Each product is different. The way your customers talk is different, so it's always a bit of a work in progress. But essentially, you go from this knot of just here's all of the information and all of the words coming at you from your reviews, and the auto tags just immediately highlight each string and put a tag on it for you, so that essentially when you walk in, you're walking into the filing cabinet. So, you know, if you know that you've got something in your game or in your app with, you know, save games, and you know what words your players use when they talk about this, you can set up your auto tags. It will automatically tag these for you, and then you don't have to manually unpick this knot of information. And it's just great. The best way that I've seen it work so far for us with AppFollow was actually a temporary issue. I'm glad it was temporary, but just a sudden influx of a temporary issue, and it led to very specific issue reports coming in from our players, all using very specific phrasings and words. So we could immediately just slam out an auto tag rule using the kind of different keywords with the translation that we knew. So there is the translation contains element, so we didn't even need to do different keywords for each language, and then it just auto tagged them all for us. We could immediately feed back to product to say this is how much it has affected us, and we could immediately then also bulk reply once we'd seen them all. So it was, yeah, a win-win situation, really.
Nice. I'm hoping, guys, you can hear me, because I'm seeing that there's some comments about audio issues. If you're still getting them, just let me know, and we'll try and fix that. Thanks for that, Lauren. Yeah, that's like a really useful bit of information, especially around that influx, like how you can actually manage it, because an influx inevitably can create a bit of a knot when you've got, you know, your day-to-day goings on with tagging, and then all of a sudden this happens, a very specific issue. You don't want it to, in a disorganized fashion, come in and create problems around that form of management. I suppose, Jason, from the perspective of issue classification, how does, from the side of Helpshift, how can that help untangle the knot? And how does it create a form of manageable organization from the in-app messaging perspective and beyond?
Right. Very similar to what Lauren described too with the app reviews.
Right.
I mean, think about it as like you're trying to add these little counters, these custom identifiers to the issues. Like you get an issue in, and what is all the context that we can currently gain from this issue right now, and then apply labels that help identify that by automation later or by some kind of tool that you're using to report on that data. Pretty much anything that allows you to just quickly segment each of these issue types, whether it's classification, like you said, oh, this is a billing issue. Okay, cool. Well, now we could see how many people have reported billing issues. And of those billing issues, X% of people say that they can't buy something with their credit cards all of a sudden. And then we find out even further that half of these issues are tagged with Visa. So maybe there's a Visa problem. And then you can find out we've got a 300% increase in this over the last hour. Maybe we should probably, send a note to our developers that something could be going on. It's just a very easy way for like human beings to actually be able to digest and interact with the data once it comes out the other side, instead of having to like manually sift through every single issue to then maybe pick up a pattern like, hey, you know what? I think there might be a Visa problem.
Right.
That way you just get it automatically. It's all verified.
Yeah, nice. And I mean, it's good that there's that consistency around how that works across, Helpshift, and whether you're using Helpshift and you're categorizing those issues or that feedback, or whether it's on AppFollow, it's good that there's got that consistency in how it works, because you have that filing cabinet that works across platforms. Whether you're using it separately or via integration, there is that ability to have that knowledge that can work across the different platforms, even though there might be some specifics that are different. The concept is very similar, and that's always a good thing to see, especially for people who are working across these different things. Cool. So what I wanted to go on to next was really about support and how you as a team becomes the collect and share of insights. You're not going to be the only team that does this, but you could be potentially one of the most important aspects of this sort of this job, right? Now, one of the case studies I quite like to talk about is the 4-step system in which one of our clients, Gram Games, did. And they used the integration with Helpshift and AppFollow to allow themselves to work across support and product in a way that they could prioritize issues. And this allowed support to have that consistency of being that collect and share of insights. So what they did is they would tag reviews using the auto tagging from AppFollow. And once they collected all these reviews and had them categorized, they then exported them, or used the at a later point, use the integration, the Helpshift integration, to put them over into Helpshift. And once they were over to Helpshift, then they created issue subcategories using tickets to create those different issue boxes. And once those different issue boxes existed, they could manage things like, let's say they had a new version or some new content coming out, they could then manage those tickets for a categorized issue in case there was something like, an influx of tickets coming in from reviews. So if that happened, then the spike would lead to an issue prioritization increasing, and that would go off to product and the developer team, and they would be able to deal with that as a higher priority than it would be otherwise. And I thought that's just a great little example of how you can use the different elements of Helpshift and AppFollow. Now, Lauren, I know you don't use the integration. We've spoken about this before, and you have your own reasons for that. It's just how Kolibri works. But through categorizing using AppFollow's auto tags, how does it empower customer support to actually help other teams? Like, how do you use those tools to become like the collector and the share of insights from your perspective? And I'm thinking like certain issues like managing, release of a new level or new content coming out for the game. How do you manage that, those releases coming out when, you know, you've got potentially lots of people coming in, leaving reviews, leaving issues on your on the review section.
Yeah, it's for sure. It's the tags just proving how invaluable they really are. As long as you've got them set up in some form of logical way, it just makes the insights all the more accessible for everybody. Essentially, it gives other teams the context they would maybe otherwise miss. The way that we tend to categorize is, for example, issue or idea, because we can actually have ideas around features which already exist, which could also have issues. And it's very different if you just have kind of raw data with no context to it, and already putting that into the categories, into the tags. It just makes it instantly accessible, instantly clear to people who are kind of checking in on that data. So especially, as you say, yeah, with sudden spikes in issues, you can clearly see that it's an issue because it's categorized as such. When it's a new feature, you can see if it's balanced between the more positive or the more negative. It's, yeah, great like that.
I see. And, you know, we're talking about auto tags and how that helps you manage. But let's say you've got this influx of, you've got an influx of reviews that have come in, and a lot of the reviews really only need like a short message, you know, just something that doesn't require an agent to sit there replying, right? How do you ensure, you know, that you can manage that influx of reviews without having a human agent sitting there typing a couple of words to each review, which obviously isn't good for, you know, time or resource?
Yeah, definitely. It's where kind of the wider scope of automations really comes in. The auto replies are great for that, or even just after having had the auto tag, you can then use the bulk reply, for example, using the templates, which are implemented within AppFollow. So yeah, really just all of the low-hanging fruit, as it were, all the really easy stuff, just being able to move your actual human resources away from that, have automation handle it, and it then just means that your humans can be having a bit more impact. For example, if you have already categorized the stuff, you'll know, okay, look, all of these like lower value issues, we can't deal with these right now, we're going to set up something else to handle them, and everybody can go and focus on the categories that we have determined as higher prio. It, yeah, just helps you to split your resources in the best way at that time.
I see. And like, I suppose, Jason, going on from what Lauren's just said, how do you, like, would you say how do you ensure that prioritization, when it comes in as a spike and that ticket prioritization increases, right? How do you ensure that is clearly communicated across the business?
I mean, that kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. I mean, you need those processes in place so that stakeholders are expecting this feedback, whether you have like a regular cadence of like a 24-hour report or a 7-day-a-week report. I mean, a common strategy was to, you know, do almost live reporting or increase the frequency at which we report to the developers, coinciding with the launch of major features, so that the developers are aware that we're launching this feature, and then we have a team that's going to be giving more up-to-date hour-by-hour feedback on what's happening. And then if everything's going smoothly, we can dial it back and maybe start doing a daily summary and then maybe a weekly and so on and so forth. But it really just comes down to that participation of everybody needs to sort of be involved and ready and awaiting this feedback. And that's the best way to go about it.
Nice. And yeah, I suppose it's, working it out as you implement it. There might be things that you learn along the way in terms of how each of your team works best in terms of communicating those things across. They might have their own systems, and it's working out how to work with those systems when you set up this infrastructure. I just thought, Jason, it might be quite useful for everyone to quickly describe, like, having a quick overview of the AppFollow and Helpshift integration, just, how it works and, its use cases.
Yeah, I do have one customer, and I know that you had Graham Games as well, but essentially the way it works is, some magic is happening on the AppFollow side that's able to tag and prioritize and eventually send those reviews over through to Helpshift. And within the Helpshift side, it's created as it looks like a support issue, but in that support issue, you have all of the AppFollow integration information, such as like the score that the user provided, how many stars they rated you, and then all of the other context like that would come from the App Store itself or the review site. So you get to know a little bit of context about the user, device and whatnot, the App Store came from, the platform they're playing on. And then you get the review itself, right? And what's really cool about the use case that I've oversaw was that the agents were able to, and this particular organization wants to manually respond to every single app review, although that is not necessary. That was the way that they chose to go about it. And so they actually have all of their agents in the middle of working on customer support issues. They may also be automatically assigned an AppFollow review. And then they can take a look at the review and then, proceed with a reply, or perhaps even that'll give the agents a clue to alert the higher ups about a particular issue that maybe we weren't aware about in the past. Or maybe we could even find more about, information about that user and solve their problem. Maybe if they had just contacted support, we could have helped them out and avoided the review in the first place. So it's just a really powerful way to just see all of the other feedback that your agents might not normally come across.
Right, and so it's just creating that sort of cadence, and also almost that proactivity. You're not waiting for this massive spike to happen, and someone notices it. You've got that system which it feeds into Helpshift, and you can manage it as it comes in, almost before the issue becomes something where everyone's commenting about it, everyone's leaving messages or reviews about it. You've got it the moment this starts to happen, right from your Helpshift platform. Great. I think next we want to talk about is how automation, right, helps product reduce demand and support. One of the things that people often think about using automation is, yes, it saves you time, but it can also create a better product, right? So how it often works from the perspective of our clients is, in-app or review management automation tackles the repetitive and simple tasks, as Lauren pointed out earlier, and then as that sort of evolves, then the agents have more time to share insights and work with product to prioritize that development, right? What's important, what's happening, what are people saying, and then the outcome is a better product. With better performance, there's less demand on for support in the long run, right? So that really that sort of cycle is quite beneficial for any company, really. So Jason, I thought I'd start with you in terms of thinking about how this product, this sort of product to support system works. Could you dive into a bit about how the self-service with Helpshift, how that can help solve those simple queries for users? Because we've spoken about auto reply, but I'm really interested in the self-service aspect, because when you think about that first step, how can self-service help you with that?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing that people think of when they think self-service is some sort of knowledge management system, a knowledge base. At Helpshift, we have our help center with a system to display FAQs. Really, that whole thing is designed for you, the business, to be able to put self-help articles out there for people to read. If they encounter a problem or a bug with your app, or if they need a service, they can get instructions for how to solve their own problem, or maybe reassurance that it's a known issue and it's being worked on, from the actual FAQs. But inevitably, you're going to have customers that either just kind of skip reading the FAQs, or perhaps they still disagree with the solution provided in the article. They might want to reach out to support anyway, right? And Helpshift has something called the modern support journey, where it's essentially how we describe all of the features and how they interact with each other from before, the moment that customer experiences a problem to the moment they're providing feedback on their whole experience, right? And self-help is a huge part and a huge focus of the first part of that modern support journey. So like I said, we have the FAQs. Customer experiences a problem, they're going to go look online, try to find some answers. Okay, well, let's say they're going to go ahead and reach out to support anyway. Well, when they go and open the chat widget, or they open, for in-app messaging, they're going to be presented with a couple of options, right? If their customer is using smart intents, then the user is going to be able to select from a list of pre-formatted categories. So then you're essentially automating classification by having your users tell you what their problem is. Why are they contacting us? And it captures that intent data. And then from there, you can even have their problem being routed through what we call the quick search bot. It's just one last attempt to say, like, hey, here's 3 FAQs that may or may not solve your problem. Take a look at these, right? And it gives them a chance to self-serve one last time. And then from there, depending on their problem, if you've created automations to route to this specific problem, this intent, to a specific workflow, such as a chatbot, that chatbot can then take some time to ask more follow-up questions, to learn as much as possible about this issue that the customer is experiencing, so that it's ready for the agent by the time it gets to them. They don't have to spend the next day or so going back and forth trying to learn about their issue. Or even that, like, issues can be fully automated too, where it even provides them with the answer.
Right. And so it helps save the agent that time, right? So they can spend that time, sharing those insights and working with the product to prioritize, because by using self-service and the quick search bot and everything else, you're allowing your customers to help themselves, really, isn't it? And, if they can't help themselves from that initial point, you're sending gentle nudges to ensure that they can maybe read some of these articles that might connect to their issue. And I think that is a really good way of sort of like slowly helping them move to the sort of right solution. Now, the next, I think this slide sort of nicely feeds off what Jason, you were talking about, because you mentioned some of these already from Helpshift's in-app perspective. So I thought it'd be really useful for everyone in the audience to sort of see how support automation, from the point of view of communicating with users, can be broken down. From the review management perspective, you've got the auto tags, the auto translate, auto reply, and auto report, right? So what's included, you are allowed to deal with repetitive reviews when it comes to auto reply. It allows you to deal with those reviews that sort of might just need a simple response. The auto report is your sort of brand's app reputation protector. If you've got those abusive or those fake or spammy reviews, auto report can automatically report that to the app source for deletion, right? And auto translate, that allows you to understand your reviews in any language. And it allows you to sort of have that response strategy with a global user base without spending money on outsourcing or finding an agent who can speak that language. That's probably not very easy from the perspective of especially when you're scaling. That might not be a consideration that you want to have on top of everything else. And then obviously is the auto tag, which we've talked about, that it's your magic organizer. So Jason, from the perspective of Helpshift, I thought it'd be useful to just break down this sort of four different technologies, and just to give a quick introduction to each one, knowing that I know you have talked about a couple of these already, but just have a quick introduction to each.
Yeah, no worries. And so, like we were talking about before with a quick search bot, that being just a small part of the, the initial deflection self-help process, right? And then from there, once an issue is going to become an issue and it's going to enter your support ecosystem, we want intent classification to occur and issue routing to occur based on what their intent is. And so, we have smart intents, we have Sense AI Predict, just a number of different tools to really help identify what that issue is and what the customer needs help with before it moves on to either a bot or an agent. And then from there, of course, we have chatbots. So, the automations, so what we call automations is sort of the conductor in the center that's saying like, what is this issue? Okay, it belongs here. What is that issue? Oh, that belongs over here instead, right? And so those automations in the center are doing all the work and putting all the issues where they need to go. So if it arrives at a chatbot, custom bots are extremely powerful. You can write them to do so many different things, and it's a simple visual bot builder. You don't need to code or anything like that. You just say, ask this question here, give this response here, route it over here. It's all little cards you can design it with. And then, of course, the beauty of all this is that, with asynchronous messaging, it's not quite live chat, although you can treat it like live chat. It's asynchronous, meaning once a user leaves that chat, they're not disconnected from the chat. It's always going to be there, right? Somebody has to choose to say this is done and close it. And so all of this stuff, all of these questions and all these self-services, the end user can actually do all of this at their own pace. They don't need to sit there and like devote the next 30 minutes to this. They can get up and go eat dinner with their family or take care of like the package that came to the door or something like that. So,
yeah. So I mean, it's useful, especially I can't remember the amount of times that I've spoken to someone on a sort of in-app chat, and I've had to go away somewhere, and then I've had to come back, like it's gone, and then I have to speak to someone completely new who had no idea about my issue, and it's not a fun experience, especially after work. You just kind of want an issue that you have to be resolved with the same person. I suppose, Lauren, from the perspective of all these different automation tools, how does I'm aware that Kolibri use auto tags, they use auto reply. how do you track the performance of these things? Because it's like you're going to be implementing these different automation into your sort of, you know, into your day to day. They'll be working consistently, but how do you ensure that you know how they're performing and how they're working, and how does that sort of work for you at Kolibri?
So a very immediately visual kind of KPI that we use is the automation score that's shown within AppFollow. So you have an entire section to review how your automations are performing. So you get lots of different info, how many replies they're sending, the percentage share they've got, how many tags are theirs, their CSAT score, all that kind of thing. But the automation score is just kind of a one-stop number to just look at and see what percentage is being taken on by the automations essentially. And that's really useful because even if that isn't giving me, you know, the seconds, minutes and hours that I'm currently saving, if I see a really big number there, then I know the automation is taking a chunk out of my human workload, which is great. But then aside from that, it really is, it's the time, right? It's the amount of time that your humans are no longer spending on reviews, the amount of time you can see them spending on other things, how quickly other things are getting done instead, the more high value, high impact, more fun topics that they're getting to work on. It's really great. And I've even ended up kind of reinvesting saved time in feeding the review management and the automations, just because you then get a human to kind of sanity check it every so often, make some tweaks to the setups that you've got, because maybe there's some new words, some new phrases, some new issues you haven't accounted for yet. And then you also get fewer and fewer pings from people saying, hey, like the robot said this and it's weird. So that's also good to see that over time, you just kind of stop hearing about it, and no news is good news, you know?
Yeah, because otherwise, you know, you don't want to leave it on its own. You know, no one wants to set up automation and be like, okay, go off and do your thing. You know, we're going to go do our thing over here. It's ensuring that it's working to the best of ability. You're saving that time that, you know, you hope to save with automation. So I suppose the sort of next topic is quite an interesting one. What I like to sort of name as the sort of title here is, rather it being reactive to proactive, it's not letting customer support become firefighters, right? So support is not supposed to just be there to put out fires when they appear. It's having that proactive approach so you can help your customers in the best way. So there's 4 steps in which I've sort of suggested here. There's the building the comprehensive and extensive knowledge base. There's step 2, which is updating those reviews or those messages that have been left, that you fixed the problem they reported. That can also be done via email. From I understand from Helpshift. There's the using sentiment analysis and other tools to keep listening to what users are saying, right? So how's that changing over time? How is automation working to improve that sentiment or decrease that sentiment? And then breaking down those team silos that we previously discussed. So ultimately, customer support shouldn't be about damage control just. It should also be about, you know, improving that customer experience, you know, for people across the different touch points. So, Jason, I wanted to really ask you about the knowledge base, because I know you spoke about self-service, but what is it about a knowledge base that makes you know, support proactive rather than reactive?
Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of like to look at it is, you know, being proactive is just learning your lessons from the last time you were reactive, right? And so you're taking those experiences and then saying, okay, cool, we just put out that fire. What can we do to get ahead of that fire next time, right? Yeah. I mean, it's hard to just sort of predict in a vacuum what the next problem is going to be, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're not. But at the very least, you have all this information, you have all this data, you know what your customers are contacting you about. Let's put steps, you know, let's put resources for them to be able to solve these problems themselves. So a knowledge base is really, it's supposed to be a, you know, a living, breathing, evolving document of knowledge and education, right? And then that education is going to come from customer support. It's going to come from your users, and ultimately your agents too. Maybe your agents find solutions to problems that weren't previously known, and now that's something we can share with the community by posting it on the knowledge base. And so next time when more users encounter that same problem, they now have instructions to solve it much faster than their predecessors, right? And that's kind of how I look at the knowledge base and how to make it effective.
Nice. And yeah, I suppose it's like you're going to be constantly populating it with more articles as those fires approach. You don't want the house to burn down again. So
Right.
you're going to find the ability to, have that knowledge base as sort of that deterrent, to stop that that from happening again. So, Lauren, I suppose I wanted to ask you, in terms of proactiveness and like it actually happening in practice, right? I've spent time searching proactive customer support on Google just to see what was out there, just to see what people suggest. And a lot of the time it's about people saying, oh, it's, you just have to predict what people are going to have problems with, right? Which I think is just pretty unrealistic. But from the point of Kolibri, how do you ensure that you're creating that proactive support going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I will give a shout out to all human support agents here who do have an element of the psychic about them sometimes. If you know that something's going live in an update and you can anticipate how your current community will take that or what they might be confused about, there is a slight element of that psychic ability there. So shout out there. But for how it works otherwise for the proactiveness, for me, it's essentially these first two steps kind of are the biggest ones for me because, yeah, it's the automation kind of is proactive because you're automating the knowledge by making it self-serve through a knowledge base, and it's being proactive knowing, do you know what, when we get new people into the app, or when this particular time of year comes around, or this particular sale happens, or this particular feature's live, you just know this is going to cause confusion, let's clear it up, and you get it out there in the knowledge base. And so yeah, it's getting out in front of it already. And then exactly, instead of just being completely reactive and everybody reported an issue, we said sorry and we're looking into it. It's great to then have the time to reinvest, to go back and update them, as you say, in step 2. And this is also then where something like having everything auto tagged really helps, because then when you have the time you can now reinvest, you can literally just filter for everything in that time frame or with that tag, and you can use your templates and you can update them all and say, hey, we actually fixed this, or hey, here's the update for you. And yeah, it means that, yeah, you just get to try and get out ahead of it, or at least catch up, as it were. Right. So yeah, makes it a bit more fun for everyone.
Yeah, no longer being the firefighter, as it were. Great. So next I wanted to discuss is something that I've been quite interested in terms of how this has happened. So the Kolibri, I understand, Lauren, you ran a automation test, as it were, over the holidays of, was it Christmas and Easter? As you can see here, the auto replies during those periods went up. Was it like 100% automation?
Very nearly on some of the apps. Yeah, some of them not quite 100%, but as close as we could get it, yes.
So can you tell us a bit why you decided to run these experiments?
Sure. I mean, the too long didn't read version is go hard or go home, I suppose. Very much we were just like, we've got this tool, we want to try it out, we kind of want to stress test it, and what better way to stress test it than to do this? If we already know here's where we're currently at with automation and what it's doing, which is nothing yet, if we go as far as we can the other side, we know kind of that the sandbox we're going to get to play in, right? So that's really what pushed it. And then of course the times of year, as everybody probably knows, over big holiday seasons you tend to have reduced staffing because people like to have holidays or they're at home with their families. But then quite often your customers are using your apps more because they've got more time, because they've got some money as presents, they've got new devices they want to be swapping between. So very much it seemed just the perfect time to stress test it. If we weren't going to see results at that time, I don't know when we would.
Yeah, I understand. And I suppose how did it go? Like, did you see any negative impact on your key KPIs during these experiments?
So actually, kind of publicly, no. We didn't see the ratings tank or anything. It was really nice for that. And if nothing else, actually, when we looked at the test which covers March here, the rating increase versus rating decrease that we saw an average plus 0.2 increase where we answered, including all the automations with the quick robot replies, versus any reviews that didn't get any message, got an average 0.5%, 0.5 rating reduction. So it really showed, even if it's the robot replying to them, it has a positive impact. So that was really great. I'd say the only negative thing that kind of came out of it was the fact we did have a grand total of 4 reviews which directly stated that they didn't like the automated feel of the replies, the fact that it's clearly not human. But as you can see here from the number averages, with an average of around 900 reviews a day, 4 in total over the test is a negative impact I could accept.
Yeah, I think that's probably like a manageable impact, as it were. Something that you can say, okay, out of those 4, good on them, but overall it's had that effect that you would probably say is actually positive from what you were explaining. So I mean that's like really like a super insightful thing, especially like having those tests having been completed and seeing those results. It's nice to see that working in the way that you saw. Now, one of the main things that people often talk about when it comes to automation, especially in the customer support world, is the impact on CSAT. Now, I've spoken to a number of people about this, how, if you're using too many robots, people are going to know, people are going to just, get all, angry at the service because they can't reach a human. But actually, when I looked at Helpshift's report around this, it seemed from the data that this wasn't really the case, but I think rather than me giving the outline of the report, I thought it would only be right for Jason to give the to sort of give the introduction about what was said in the report, what was found out based on Helpshift's client.
Yeah, I mean, so this is from our player benchmark report in 2020, and it was coinciding around the time of the pandemic, where a lot of people were staying at home more often. They were on their cell phones and their mobile devices a lot more often. So there was a lot more app interaction, there's a lot more mobile gaming. And then that caused an influx of issues for sometimes smaller support teams, and they were looking for solutions to be able to handle that influx of volume. And the answer to that was automation in a lot of cases. And like you said before, some of the concern is that, I mean, it's true. There are people who just don't like talking to bots. They want to talk to an agent right now. And that's, it's fair. I've certainly felt that way myself, especially if the automation is done very poorly or just creates a bunch of hoops for you to jump through before you can finally get the help that you need, right? So it really does depend on how carefully you plan this out. I mean, ultimately, your customer and what tolerance they're going to have for this sort of thing. And you're going to have to make the decision that you feel is best for you. But the data that we saw in this report is that the differences might actually not be as bad as maybe the few vocal minorities might make it seem, right? So by and large, full automation always ends up being sort of the lowest scoring channel. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, like I said, there's some people that just don't like it. But 2, the types of issues that you choose for full automation are either going to be so simple, there's no point it should be in our queue in the first place, or maybe it's just one of those issues that's always going to end poorly. It's always a bad answer. A customer always leaves unhappy with this particular type of suggestion or problem that they have, especially in gaming. I think that's fairly common as well. And those are the types of issues that tend to be a target for full automation. Right. That way it allows your agents to really focus on the other types of interactions. But the biggest lesson is that what we refer to as partial automation, that's agents and bots working together to solve the customer's problem, that ends up scoring higher pretty clearly, almost 100% of the time, because they do interact with the bot at the beginning, but at no point is it are we attempting to pull the wool over their eyes and pretend that this is a live agent. This is very clearly an automation. It's going to serve a purpose. It's going to speed up your solution. It's what the purpose of this bot is. So you can ask questions, do some triage, and then by the time the agent gets to it, they have all the information they need, ideally, and they can proceed with the solution immediately. And so that leads to faster response times, it leads to faster time to resolution. And I mean, time to resolution is like the primary CSAT driver across the board. It doesn't matter what vertical you are in, time to resolve is a huge factor in CSAT.
Right, and I suppose it's do you think you'd agree with the assertion that having that balance, and that balance might change, that 70-30 70% human, 30% automation, or the other way around. That might depend on the business use case, right?
Certainly.
That's not really going to be a set thing. I think everyone in the audience might have their own idea about how those are split. But Lauren, I suppose I wanted to ask you, like, from Kolibri's perspective and having implemented automation and how it works now, were there any like initial hesitations that you had before implementing that automation, and like what was it that convinced you to actually go for it?
For sure. I think the main one was the CSAT, because exactly as has been said, right? People will pick up on the fact that it sounds robotic, that it doesn't sound good, and you'll get rated lower because of it. So that really was my main concern. But essentially following the test, where I very much kind of expected to see a lot of negative feedback, lower scores, the fact that it didn't negatively impact anything on the review side, and even had a positive impact on the wider support side, because the time we weren't spending in the reviews, we were spending in the juicy one-to-one Helpshift tickets. It actually saw an improvement in the time that we were taking to resolve cases there, which ultimately has a positive CSAT impact. So it was kind of completely not what I'd really set myself up for. Nice.
And I suppose I'm going to see if I can send out a poll now. I wanted to ask, was anyone surprised by the sort of findings here around CSAT? Was there any sort of shock, or like, you didn't think that was going to be the case, or was it is it something that you kind of always knew? So I'm just going to send it out now, and I'm interested to see the results. So it's going to be a simple yes or no answer, guys. Right. I've sent it now, so hopefully everyone can see it in the poll section on the bottom right. Feel free to say yes or no about these findings. I'm really curious to see if anyone was surprised or not about it. Cool. So moving on to the one of the final topics of the webinar is how to balance the agent with automation. We talked about when you can use automation, when to not use automation in terms of the impact on CSAT. A lot of the times when we're talking at AppFollow about when you should use automation, and when I've talked with Helpshift about it, we've come to sort of an agreement that when your business is scaling and your support team doesn't have enough time and resource, automation can really help. When you need to offer that multilingual support, so remember the auto translation, you don't have those multilingual support agents. That's where it can come in as well. On top of that, there's the ability to provide support during out of office hours. You can cut down response times or increase the response rate, and you can automatically categorize customer insights through those auto tagging. But then there's the other side, is when you use the agent, right? And when you can use the agent really is around the dealing of complex issues that require the interpersonal skills of a human, that human touch, right? And then there's the queries or reviews that involve emotions that demands that human empathy. And then there's the unusual cases, which can't be identified via industry routing or tackled via response templates, right? Things that you wouldn't have expected to just appear. Those might need the human to sort of figure that out. And then obviously lastly, there's the onboarding new customers. This can't be done by automation alone. And then finally is prioritizing help for your highest paying customers. Now, Lauren, I understand you've, as we've spoken about a lot this webinar, you've implemented AppFollow's automation, and you use Helpshift's in-app chat for your agents. Does this help with the split? Help with the sort of automation and agent balance?
Absolutely, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Oh no, it's too slow. But yes, absolutely does help for sure. Because they each offer something a little bit different. It's also quite often slightly different types of customers, of players who are using them. Often if they're going to you one-to-one via Helpshift, wanting the human interaction, it's because the issues are more complex, or they're a higher paying customer or something like this. And that's why they've chosen that platform to contact you. And that's why we're using it to make sure we're interacting with them on it. And similarly, then the reviews, they're often a bit shorter, quite often because of platform limitations, but people are just looking to vent into the ether, as it were, because either they've had a big issue that they want to shout about, or actually they just love your product so much they just want to share that and carry on. And so yeah, it's really great to have that split, just to be able to kind of interact in the appropriate manner with the different types of things going on, and then to also, yeah, split the automation versus the agent accordingly.
Nice. And I suppose, you know, the in-app chat really helps you reach your players when they need that help. You know, you don't want them to leave the app to go and find, you know, a way to communicate with Kolibri. You want them to stay within the app, stay engaged, remain, you know, within that, within your game, right? I suppose, Jason, you know, there's number 5 on when to use agents, right? Prioritizing help for your highest paying customers. How can you prioritize this? Like, how do you prioritize this? Like, how does that work? Like, you've got all these people coming in needing help. Why is that important, and how do you do that from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's important, especially because the advent of the free-to-play app market, free-to-play gaming, it's gonna be a lot of customers that, you know, perhaps we don't have the bandwidth or sometimes even the funding to be able to have a human agent for a one-on-one session with every single one of them, right? I mean, we're talking pretty big volumes here that would be difficult to manage. So Helpshift has something called custom issue fields, and it's something that is embedded into the SDK, into the installation, into your actual app. And it allows you to basically take bits of information that you already know about this particular user, their account, such as, are they a high-paying customer? Do they have a VIP status? How many purchases have they made in the last, you know, year or what have you? And that data can then be stored in these custom issue fields and attached to the issue when it's created in Helpshift, in the Helpshift ecosystem. And so then our automations and custom bots and other, you know, AI features can actually trigger actions based on what is in that custom issue field. So just as a quick, you know, example, a customer is a VIP status customer, very high paying, important customer. They submit an issue. Their status as a VIP is submitted with that issue, and then an automation can look for any issues that have this VIP status in that custom issue field, and then route them to a specialized workflow, either, you know, a bot with less questions, or maybe, you know, an issue that would normally be fully automated for free users isn't fully automated for a paid user, and they get routed to an agent directly instead. Something like that, right?
Right.
So it allows you to really dive into user segmentation. Like, we've seen examples of, you know, routing issues where there are customers on like the first 20% of levels, and then users that have gotten a bit further into the games and go to this workflow instead. Really, sky's the limit. Like, whatever you know about your customer, you can use to automate off of it if you had a use case for it.
Right. And yeah, I suppose it's, you know, allowing you to sort of figure out when someone comes in, you know, and they're a high paid customer, knowing the right route for that person, and you ensure that that's implemented in, helps you with that flow. I suppose the final question I really had was to the audience. I think we can take some questions now, because I think we've got a couple of minutes before the end, and I think we've already got a question that came in a while ago. But anyone who's got any more questions, please put it in the question box right now, and we will answer them as best possible. So the first question is to you, Jason. What tool do you suggest to use to collect and analyze in-app feedback? I think we've probably talked a bit about this throughout the webinar, but it might be interesting to sort of give a little answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so Helpshift in and of itself, you know, the process of doing frontline customer service with Helpshift is sort of the main source of in-app feedback. It's just the problems that your customers are reporting to your agents, the problems they need solutions for. That's the feedback that you get from doing customer support. But alternatively, we also have Feedback Plus, which is a new product from Helpshift, where it's a lighter version of our SDK, but it allows app developers to implement like a submit feedback button within their app, and then the users can tap that button, provide their feedback in whatever format they choose, and then that gets created as a feedback issue in the Helpshift ecosystem, and that can be routed directly to the engineers that are looking for this insight, right?
Right.
As far as analyzing feedback, I mean, there's a number of different options. Helpshift has the analytics API that allows you to connect and pipe this data that we have into whatever, third-party, reporting tool that you choose. We also integrate with Power BI, Microsoft's Power BI. So we have a number of reports that help you, slice and dice all that information to see it in any which way that you need and all that. So yeah, I mean, there's so much more too. I hope that answers your question. If it didn't, please let me know in the chat.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we have got a response from a poll. We've got 13 people voting, and it was actually pretty split. There was 7 said no, it didn't surprise them, and 6 said yes. So there is some people, probably some of you guys probably are aware that maybe that balance works quite well for CSAT. Or that just using 100% automation could work for some, but may have an impact, and maybe 100% manually could also have an impact on your efficiency and then ultimately your CSAT. But it's great to see that some people were surprised by that data, because it definitely surprised me when I read it. If we haven't no more questions, I think we can end it there. But thank you so much, Jason and Lauren, for taking part in the webinar. It's been extremely useful. And thank you everyone for sticking with us and hearing all the different points of discussion. We will be sharing a recording right after this, which will be sent to your email. So you'll have that available to you. So yeah, thank you guys, and have a great rest of the day. Bye now.